My wife looked me straight in the eyes, while my 82-year-old mother was clutching her chest and struggling to breathe. Instead of handing me her car keys, she folded her arms, shrugged, and said, "Figure it out." In that single moment, 11 years of marriage collapsed. I did not know it yet, but those 3 words would cost her far more than she ever imagined. Within 72 hours, my mother would rewrite her will. My wife would lose everything she thought she was entitled to, and I would finally understand the difference between someone who loves you and someone who simply shares your address. My name is Mason Carter, and until that Wednesday morning, I honestly believed I had a good marriage. My wife Lauren could be cold at times, but I convinced myself every couple had flaws. I spent years making excuses for her because keeping the peace seemed easier than facing the truth. Looking back now, I realize I was not protecting my marriage. I was protecting an illusion that should have ended long before that day. At exactly 7:42 that morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee. The screen showed Mum. The second I answered, I knew something was wrong. Her voice was weak and shaky, nothing like the strong woman who had spent 82 years taking care of everyone around her. She quietly told me her chest felt tight and her left arm had suddenly gone numb. My mother never complained about anything. She raised me alone after losing my father, worked harder than anyone I have ever known, and refused to ask for help unless she truly had no other choice. If she was calling me, it meant she was scared. I grabbed my keys before remembering my truck was still sitting in the repair shop. The only vehicle at our house was Lauren's SUV. I ran upstairs and asked if I could borrow it so I could get my mother to the hospital. I expected concern. I expected urgency. Instead, Lauren calmly reminded me she had work to finish and dinner plans with her friends later that evening. Then she looked me in the eye and said, "She is your mother, not mine. Figure it out." For a few seconds, I simply stared at her. I could not believe the woman I had shared my life with was refusing to help while my mother might be having a heart attack. I did not argue because there was no time. Instead, I called my neighbor Jack. Before I could even finish explaining the situation, he interrupted me and said, "I will be there in 4 minutes." He arrived even faster than that, helped my mother into his car and drove us to the hospital without asking for a single thing. The doctors confirmed she had suffered a mild cardiac event. They told me we had gotten her there just in time. As she rested in her hospital bed, she reached for my hand, smiled weakly, and whispered, "You came." Those 2 simple words nearly broke me, because she had spent my entire life showing up for me without hesitation. Being there for her was never a choice. It was an honor. While I sat in that hospital waiting room for hours, my phone stayed silent. Lauren never called to ask how my mother was doing. She never sent a message to check on me. Meanwhile, Jack stayed in the parking lot the entire afternoon, just in case I needed another ride home. Watching the difference between those 2 people forced me to face a painful truth. The man who owed me nothing stood beside me. The woman who promised to stand beside me forever chose dinner instead. The next morning, my mother surprised me by asking me to call her attorney. She quietly explained that she wanted to update her will. She told me she had spent years watching who truly showed up when life became difficult, and what happened yesterday only confirmed everything she already knew. Later that afternoon, her lawyer arrived at the hospital, and together they changed every important document. The family home, my father's savings, his restored classic Mustang, and nearly everything they had spent decades building would now be left to me. She even set aside money for the local animal shelter, where she had volunteered for years. One name was missing from every single page: Lauren. When I told my mother she did not have to make those changes because of me, she smiled gently and shook her head. She said this was never about revenge. It was about respect. She wanted everything she and my father had worked for to stay with people who understood loyalty, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Then she looked at me and asked one question that echoed in my mind long after I left the hospital. "Are you truly happy?" For the first time in years, I could not lie to myself. When I finally returned home after bringing Mom safely back to her house, Lauren was waiting for me. She had already learned about the changes to the will, and the panic on her face said everything. She begged me to convince my mother to reverse her decision. She claimed it had all been a misunderstanding and insisted she had planned to visit the hospital later. I looked at her and remembered begging for her car while my mother struggled to breathe. I remembered Jack waiting for hours in a hospital parking lot, without expecting anything in return. Then I calmly told Lauren that my mother had made her decision the same way Lauren made hers, clearly, deliberately, and without asking anyone for permission. That was the moment she finally understood this had never been about money. She had already lost something far more valuable than an inheritance. She had lost me. As I walked out the front door and drove back to my mother's house, I felt a peace I had not experienced in years. My mother's medical emergency did not destroy my marriage. It simply exposed the truth that had been hiding beneath it all along. Sometimes the hardest day of your life does not change the people around you. It simply reveals who they have always been. And once you see that truth, there is no going back.